Thank you, everybody, for joining us back here at Nubeva's channel. We're sitting here again with Randy, and we have some really exciting news. As Randy, you are hanging a couple of victories under your belt today. How are you feeling?
Absolutely. I mean, I just came back from Paris. We went to, besides the victories from a ransomware standpoint, I did go to support my team, Real Madrid, in Paris, and we won our 14th European Cup Champions League. So that was fantastic.
Yeah, congratulations, man. Let's say some wins across the victory.
Yeah. And then unfortunately, the team that we beat, it was an English team, and their fans were not treated. They were tear gassed by the French. So the English and the French just don't know what to say to that. So
yeah, you guys get really intense with your games. I mean,
no. I sat on a place with my wife and 4 daughters, and it was peaceful. It was nice. It was
okay.
So I wouldn't generalize it across the board for sure. I felt like I was in a different game. So
you were a well-behaved Randy. I believe you there.
There you go. And of course, after I came back, I caught COVID for the second time. So
listen,
one of those things.
Yeah, it is. It just is what it is. But glad to see you here. Glad to see you healthy and back at it again. I'm glad to finally have you on because this is something we want to talk about here. Which you guys had 2 successes in decrypting 2 ransomware attacks. One from ReEvil and one from Conti ransomware without paying the ransoms. So walk us through the whole story here.
Yeah, so I'm gonna mix the stories up, and it's actually been more than 2 since we actually announced it, and we're doing this recording, which is actually quite scary. So I'm gonna mix the story up to not actually end up identifying anybody in particular, but everything that I talked about has happened. It may not happen to the same customer, so that you can't really provide a signature to the stories that I tell. Yep. So it's unbelievable. I'm just I talked to CEOs, and they clearly hadn't slept for 30 hours. They just didn't believe that it would hit them. So that always starts. That's always the case. The first one is ReEvil. We talked about that. It's ReEvil was potentially the largest gang last year on ransomware. We believe it was. And then I think late last year, the FBI, the United States FBI, actually submitted a request to the Russian authorities. And at the request of the Americans, the Russians actually arrested them. And so there was a belief that, hey, ReEvil gang is over. Now, obviously, beginning of this year, because of the invasion of Ukraine, then that gang was actually released. We had heard about that. And the fact that we actually saw it, we see ReEvil in a new variant. So there's hundreds to thousands of variants every day. And this is a very interesting variant that actually we were able to get the keys and decrypt. So the customer was exceptionally happy, obviously, from that perspective. But it's very, very interesting. We talked about how the gangs this is really organized crime. So you got specialists, right? So you got the people who created the ransomware. You got affiliates that go in and put the ransomware somewhere. And then you got experts that, frankly, they're not really in the ransomware business. They just penetrate a network, and then they hand it off to the next guy. And the next guy goes in and runs the ransomware and then hands it out to the next guy. It's just really fascinating. It's ransomware as a service.
It's an entire corporate structure. It's probably have marketing.
It is
HR and everything too. I mean,
no, this is VAR. This is a VAR. That 24/7 support. You name it. Yeah, this is as professional as it gets. So
yeah, it's really wild to think about that. But yeah, so walk us through then. So how did this happen? I imagine CEOs were stressing a lot once this started setting in, right? Yeah.
So in this particular case, the network was penetrated at least a month before the ransomware was actually run. So typically what we see is people get in, they'll look around, they see, well, they'll do some research on the company on whether they're going to pay, have they been ransomed before, are they running any cybersecurity products, et cetera, et cetera. And then once they're in, they'll, within a 72-hour time frame, they start, deleting. They would have deleted the backups or influenced it in some way that obviously the backups don't work anymore, which happened here. It happens in all the cases actually, and then they'll actually start testing little things in the corners of the network that people aren't watching, and then once they're confident, they'll actually detonate it. And what we are beginning seeing now is actually quite different. It used to be that you're always told if you get an attachment in an email, don't double click it, because if you double click it, that might be the ransomware. Yeah. In this particular case, they're not. They're actually putting ransomware that cannot be run unless they have a specific passcode as an argument in it. And so the purpose of that is they'll actually run it. Somebody's in your network running it, and files get encrypted. And then it's just like it cleaned up the backup, it actually self-deletes the ransomware and deletes the argument to the ransomware. And so the purpose of that is very similar to when we describe our marketing and our pitch on value add, right? So if you use Nubeva and we get the keys and we reverse your ransomware, the encryption, the ransomware doesn't know that we did that, right? It could have been the backup. It could have been somebody stubborn and didn't want to pay the ransom, right? So you're looking at the days, weeks, or months later, whether they actually realize it was Nubeva or it was something else, right? So you can't iterate to get better against Nubeva. Whereas if you're going against typically endpoint protection or EDRs, you name it, well, as soon as it stops you as a ransomware, you know, well, I got to do something different so it doesn't stop me next time. Well, it's the same thing here. The ransomware people now are basically putting out ransomware that you can't iterate against. So unless you know the passcode that started this ransomware, you can't actually run it. And so if you can't, and the ransomware is encrypted with that passcode. And so you can't actually decrypt that and run it unless you have the passcode, of which they're actually then cleaning out their tracks from that. And so the first thing we realized in this particular case is we knew we got the keys and we can decrypt, but we can't, it took us a while to actually track down, working with IR teams to actually track down the actual ransomware sample. And so that was fascinating too. So we're gone from the days of just send it to some, you know, person that's not technical and see if you get lucky and they double click it too. Okay, forget about that. Whatever they double click just got me into their network. Once I'm in the network, then I'm going to put the ransomware, and I'm not going to attach it to anybody else. So we've gone from the days of people accidentally running a ransomware to, you know, they just need to get in. Once they're in, they'll do their thing, but you can't really start getting samples and iterating against them. So another thing about this that was fascinating that we had not seen before was that this REvil sample was packaged. So typically you have the ransomware and you package in something so that, for example, Windows Defender can't catch it. Right?
Yeah, makes sense.
So it's actually the code, the ransomware, not the product. The ransomware is actually encrypted inside this package method, which is still the same executable. In this particular case, I'm going to test your age here. It was actually packaged and written in something called Pascal. Do you know what that is?
I do not. I do not. What's Pascal?
So do you know what Fortran is?
4chan?
Fortran.
Fortran. No, I did not know what that.
Okay.
I know what 4chan is.
Okay.
Not the same thing.
Not the same thing. So these are all older computer languages. So, you know, back in the 80s and the 70s, you used to program in Pascal. And before that, you used to program in Fortran for the most part financial. And so these applications are very old, but well written. And so people will still, organizations will continue using that because they're very reliable, but you have a hard time finding the person who wrote it because they likely retired, okay? So a lot of times things like Windows Defender will see something like that and say, this is just an old app. It's not a ransomware, let it through. And so they unpackage that. And then, and by the way, I didn't want to singularly point out Microsoft Windows Defender. It's an excellent product. I think we discussed this a few weeks back. It's as good of as a free product, as good as some of the most expensive products in the market today. It's a very good product. But because it's everywhere, people will iterate against this. In this particular case, the ransomware was sitting inside of this Pascal package product. So I found that very interesting because as we're talking to our folks inside our engineering team, I had to go out and they go, what is this thing, right? Delphi Pascal. And I said, well, do you know what that is? And you can sort of tell based on the answer to that question, what age they're actually at. So
it's interesting.
Old stuff.
It's crazy how even over the course of us doing these interviews, they continue to adapt and come up with new tips and tricks to get into people's systems every so often, it seems like. So I mean, like, yeah, I guess that's what leads it to be a cat and mouse race. But it's interesting that okay, so overall this is still a success. So walk us through then absolutely how it turned out.
It turned out great. I mean, ultimately the business is frozen. They want to get it out. They want to understand how they were penetrated. You know, cyber insurance gets called in, which calls in an IR firm. I think we've gone over the steps of actually what happens. An IR firm comes in, and then incident response team. That's what IR stands for. And they'll actually analyze the whole systems and understand what has been ransomed. At that point, they're recovering the files and they reset. A lot of times they just buy brand new laptops and servers. It's time to upgrade your hardware at this point. And then they'll move the files that's been unencrypted, and they make sure there's no ransomware in that anymore, and put it into systems. So it takes days and weeks for the organization to truly get back and running the way they were. But at least from a business standpoint, it doesn't halt them. And this is critical because most of the time, if you don't recover the files, you're looking at 3 weeks, 22 days on the average on just getting your life back kind of a thing. So as you can imagine, boards are not thrilled when that happens. Okay.
Yeah.
And same with the second case. The Conti case was actually a little different. We were brought in by the IR firm that was brought in to analyze the situation. And so in that particular case, we not only were able to decrypt it, but at the same time, they had us for another use case. As systems get back and running, everybody's still very nervous, right? So as you can imagine, at some point you say, we were ransomed, and then you get the sample. And at some point you say, okay, we got all the machines back, but the question mark is the ransomware still there or the malware or the bad guy still there? Nobody knows, right? So at that point, you got the IR firm inspecting and looking at things, CPU, memory, network, etc., to see if something got in again. And so that's our second use case nowadays. Besides getting the files back because they were ransomed, as people are recovering, they can actually see whether there's a ransomware. But even if there was, people are now back in business much quicker.
Yeah.
So if it took 7 or 10 days for someone to inspect whether business is back as usual, now they can go 1 or 2 days and say, you know what, even if this machine was ransomed, I still got Nubeva to get me right back to where I was, 5 minutes ago. So the work that somebody's doing isn't lost. Okay, so you don't have to wait the 7 to 10 days from a business continuity standpoint. So that was fascinating. That was something that the IR firms are excited about. They brought the use case to us saying, hey, I could use you to have more confidence in getting things back, even though most of the time they already cleaned everything out. They got the things, but you just can't say you're confident until you've inspected and watched everything fully working without any problems for a period of time. So.
Yeah, so I guess the real thing here is we had been talking about waiting for this to happen, and like you said, it was more of a matter of time than anything else before these started rolling in.
Unfortunately, yes.
And then, like you said, it just kind of it's random, but it seems like there's a lot happening now. Does this I would imagine this would give you guys really solid case studies and such that you can now use to further expand and really grow your reputation. Would you say that's true?
Absolutely, and being able to reference these. Now, a lot of customers are not going to be on a call telling somebody else, I was ransomed to save me, right? So
fair enough.
They're just not going to go about doing that. But at least being able to confidently tell someone this happened and we recovered is very, very critical. Okay.
Agreed.
Yeah. The other development that we're beginning to see is as Russia has invaded Ukraine, unfortunately, that's still ongoing. I can't believe that. We're now in June now. A lot of countries, including the United States, have decided to sanction and say, well, you can't pay off. You can't pay Russian banks. You can't pay cryptocurrencies. And it isn't just the United States that's doing this now. Many different countries are doing that. So what that means is we're now beginning to see that when somebody's ransomed, or their lawyers or FBI or somebody comes in and advises us, you can't pay this off. It's against national policy to pay that. And some people still try to go around that and saying, you just got to find a law firm that's willing to wink and pay it. But obviously that is a new dimension of complexity now. It used to be that vast majority of the cases that we've seen, if not all of them, people just pay. They'll pay it and now they can't. Go ahead, sorry.
That kind of raises maybe it raises an idea. Like, let's simulate this. Let's say, for instance, okay, now this really catches on. Nubeva, now you've made the news. You did it. You've decrypted 2 ransomware attacks. Is there any bandwidth issues? Like, let's say, can you onboard as many clients as you want? Is there any issues with scalability?
Yeah, that's not a concern. The way we've actually set up our business, we're partnering with resellers, with IR firms, etc. And it's very sadly the ransomware people did exactly what we do in enterprise, right? You partner with people that can scale out, and so ultimately we are in charge of the technology to make sure we get. Once we got the keys, people know what to do with it. Our partners know what to do with it.
Gotcha.
Now, yeah, it's a pretty binary thing. Luckily, so far we're getting the keys, but frankly, if we didn't get the keys, we're pretty useless. So there's no gray area here. Right? There's no either you got the keys or you didn't get the keys. It's not like I got some of the keys or something like that. That's not going to happen. So we get the keys, they'll run it with it, they'll decrypt it. Our work is done. So
Awesome. Well, yeah, Randy, again, this is something we've been waiting for a long time. You finally did it. Congratulations on this.
thank you.
Everybody, we will keep developments coming to you as more come along the wire. Ask any questions if you guys got any. Randy, is there anything else coming up people should keep their eyes out for?
Yeah, one other thing. I think shareholders always ask me about my stocks and everything else. I'm going to be filing the fact that I gave away 20,000 shares to somebody, to an employee that we didn't have a budget to actually give this person a raise or a bonus, and I felt bad, and so I gave my shares to this person. But those shares would have they're actually in the process of right now, and they would have a 6-month wait before anybody can actually process that. So you're going to see that on filings from that perspective. It's not that I sold them. I'm not betting anything from that. So
awesome, Randy. People do really appreciate transparency, so thank you for that as well.
Great.
Thank you again, everybody, for watching. Stay tuned for more, and Randy, have a wonderful day.
Great. You too. Thank you.